For number 4, we are asked to graph the function f of x equals 1/3 to the x plus 1. So to do that, I'm going to start by creating a table for my base function 1/3 to the x. And I'm going to plug in the -1, 0, and 1 in place of the x. So when x is -1, 1/3 to the -1, that's going to flip it and turn it into a 3. 1/3 to the 0, anything to the 0 is 1, and 1/3 to the 1 is just 1/3. So I'm going to start by plotting those points. So we'll have -1, 3, 0, 1, and 1, 1/3. So just the graph of 1/3 to the x would look something like that. And then going back to my transformations, the +1, since it's inside the exponent with the x, that is telling us to move all of our points to the left one. So this point goes to the left one to end up at -2, 3. This point goes left 1 to end up at -1, 1. And this point goes left 1 to end up at 0, 1/3. And I connect those to end up with a graph that looks like that. For number 5, we're given r of x equals 5 to the x minus 2 plus 3. So here again, I'm going to start with my little table. This time my base function is going to be the 5 to the x. So when x is -1, 5 to the -1 is 1/5. When x is 0, 5 to the 0 is 1. And when x is 1, 5 to the first is 5. And then again, we start by plotting that basic set of points. So -1, 1/5, 0, 1, and 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we get something that looks like this. Now the transformations on this one, the -2, since it's inside the exponent, that tells us to shift all of our points to the right 2. And then the +3, since it's on the end of the function outside of the exponent, that tells us to shift all of our points up 3. So right 2, up 3. So starting with this point, right 1, 2, up 1, 2, 3, would put us at 1, 3 1/3, or 3 1/5. This one, right 2, up 3, would put us at 2, 4. And this one, right 2, up 3, I can't quite fit it on my graph paper, but the coordinates of that point would end up being at 3, 8. And then connecting those with my exponential curve, we would end up with something that looks like that. And number 6, we're given h of x equals 1 minus 2 to the x plus 1. Now the first thing that I'm going to do with this is I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to move that 1 to the end of the -2 to the x plus 1, and then put the +1, just so the function's written in the order that we're used to seeing it. And then we can do the different transformations from left to right. So I'm going to start with my little table for the base function 2 to the x. When x is -1, 2 to the -1 is 1/2. When x is 0, 2 to the 0 is 1. And when x is 1, 2 to the first is 2. So plotting those points, -1, 1/2, 0, 1, and 1, 2. So we have a base function that looks like this. And then the transformations that we're working with here, the negative that is in front of the 2, that tells us to flip all of our points over the x-axis. So we'll start with that. So that's going to bring this point from a y value of positive 1/2 to a y value of negative 1/2. Y equals positive 1 would go to y equals negative 1, and y equals positive 2 would go to y equals negative 2. And then the plus 1 that's inside the exponent tells us to move all of our points to the left 1, and the plus 1 on the end of the function tells us to move all of our points up 1. So starting with my last graph, the pink graph, I'm going to take all of my points left 1, up 1. So that this one ends up at -2, 1/2. Left 1, up 1 will put this one at -1, 0. And left 1, up 1 will put this one at 0, -1. And then connecting those, we end up with a final graph that looks something like that.